Hey everyone, Derrick Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. What an episode. I am so excited that you are here for this one. Welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast. Today on the show, I have Jaclyn Renee, who is a gut health specialist. And this episode blew me away. There were so many takeaways that I had on improving gut health. How do we understand what gut health is? Even that part of the conversation right out the gate gave me a lot of value of understanding everything that's involved in gut health. How do we work and measure the gut microbiome? What does that mean? We talked about how a lot of people talk about fiber and gut health. Is that the right direction? Is there better ways to improve our gut health? And what should we do? If you've had like digestive issues, bloating, you've had acid reflux issues, this episode gives so many actionable takeaways that you can use to improve that. And one thing that I took away from this is all of my patients who have an inflammatory issue, we need to start to improve the gut. That is where a lot of inflammation is produced and stored. And if we're not able to get the gut healthier, how are we going to get the proper fuel and nutrients to the cells that need to heal? So those of you that are listening, you will probably hear me talking about gut health in the office much more because it does give us such a big impact on overall systemic function and inflammation throughout the body. So if we improve that, it's the lead domino for so many other systems in the body. So as you can tell, this was a really fun one. I'm very excited. Jaclyn is a wealth of knowledge. So get your pens ready, get a few things situated, get you a glass of tea or a cup of tea, and enjoy this episode, all things gut health. I think you'll really, really have fun with this one. All right, Jaclyn Renee, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I told you before we started recording that we put out like a question to our followers of like, hey, what question do you have about gut health? And we got just like flooded with information. I was like, all right, this is something we definitely need to dive deeper into.
Yeah, absolutely. So many people are struggling with gut health, so I'm glad we're diving into it today too.
This has been interesting, and we've kind of gone around a little bit of trying to make sure that we get this scheduled while we're both healthy and all that's happening. But I was kind of happy because that gave me a little bit of extra time to research and continue pulling some studies. And exactly what you just said is quite prevalent when you study it, is like how many people are actually dealing with gut health, that it even makes the studies somewhat hard for the researchers to say like what changes are happening when they do interventions, because they're like, at least if we're doing this in Western countries, they're like, we don't know that we trust that people start with a great gut biome whenever we're recruiting these people, which is very interesting in the data to hear them say like, here's the changes we saw, but we don't know how bad their gut biome was to begin with, or something to that effect.
100%. I mean, a lot of people are born with poor gut microbiomes. I don't know if you knew this or not, or for the listeners, but if you're a C-section baby and you're not birthed through the birth canal, you're not really passing through the types of, bacteria and nutrients that you need vaginally. And then your gut is weak already to begin with. But I was actually not a C-section baby, and I was still born with gut issues. So there's a lot of people who have them as a child, and then we get into adulthood and we're wondering why all this went wrong.
Yeah, that was you hit it on the head. That was one of the first things that I noticed was like, how does our gut biome get created? How does a healthy gut like grow, so to speak? And that was one of the first things, is like us coming in contact with all the things that we come in contact with through a natural birth, make that as quote unquote clean as we can, is super important. That's not an accident. Like, we need to be in contact with all of those things. And then this has been a very interesting thing as we're kind of developing as a child. all those little dirty things that we do that as parents we probably get frustrated with. Same thing. That's apparently not an accident. That's stuff that needs to happen for our kids to create and grow this healthy biome to have a healthy gut later in life.
Yeah.
We're going to dive right in. Does this make you nervous based on the last couple years?
Um, yeah, I don't know, nervous. I'm really happy and grateful that there is so much new information and so many people like yourself out there, trying to get the information there. But you're spot on when you say like it goes even before the birth. I mean, the DNA, the genetic deposition of a child is basically determined the moment the sperm hits the egg. And so if I am an unhealthy female, my gut is really messed up, and, my husband not so healthy as well, that's already the start of a poor gut microbiome. And then whatever the parents might do along the way during the pregnancy as well. I mean, personally, both my parents smoked during my pregnancy. They didn't eat super well during it, so it showed when I was born that I was not the healthiest of people. But then we cut to what you're talking about. Am I worried about it today? For sure. I mean, so many people are struggling with long COVID, and we've seen so many gut issues come as a result of long COVID. Things are changing. There's bigger viruses, deeper viruses, things that are harder to get away from, not the common cold anymore. And so, yeah, I see it going in a direction where we really need to focus on it now. I've already said that 2024 is the year of the gut. So it's time to focus.
I love it. We're gonna come back to everything that we just talked about. Let's take a little bit of a step back.
Yeah.
When you're defining the gut for people, we've already talked a little bit about the microbiome and stuff, but what's your kind of basic definition of kind of the gut? What are we talking about whenever we put that out to people?
Well, it's interesting because people think the gut is really just, whatever, like their intestines, right? Or whatever's around their belly button. But the digestive system as a whole starts in your mouth. When you start to chew or drink water, you create saliva. That's your first entry point into the digestive system, where you start to make digestive enzymes and secrete digestive enzymes, breaks down, and then goes through the esophagus. Now it goes into your stomach. Your stomach is also a huge part of your digestive system. It creates HCl, hydrochloric acid. You need your liver, your pancreas, your gallbladder to secrete digestive enzymes, break things down, make bile. And then it goes into your intestines. And so all of that happens. That's like a 4-hour process from eating breakfast of that is your gut. And then now we have your intestines, where you have the gut lining, you have bad bacteria, you have good bacteria, you have your tight junctions that hold that gut together. So sometimes we have a narrow view when we think of the gut, but it's so vast and starts at the beginning, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a big kind of misconception, at least whenever it comes to people talking about gut health, because like gut health is like this, like we're looking under the microscope of just at maybe the intestines that they're thinking about it, or the stomach for some people. But there's so much more to probably getting that healthy, which is why I always like, and I'd love to get your take on this, but I like lead domino things for health. That's like, if you just focus on getting this healthier, a lot of other things fall in line. I find sleep is one of those. If you focus on improving sleep, it creates this like ripple effect in your life of the things you have to do to maintain and improve your sleep end up being all these healthy things. As I've studied the gut more, it seems like the gut is another like major lead domino, and that if you start to put the pieces in place to improve the health of your gut, a lot of other things seem to fall into place.
Yeah. I mean, Hippocrates, thousands of years ago, gut is the root cause of all disease, or gut is the beginning of disease. And he was not wrong. It truly is. And I see so many clients struggle with, they're like, my hormones are off, or I have eczema, I have headaches, I have acne. What no one would think, oh, something's wrong with my gut. But when we heal the gut, all of that stuff goes away. If you heal acne, your gut doesn't get better. If you fix headaches, your gut doesn't get better. But if you focus on the gut, all those things go away. So we know it's the foundation of everything when it comes to health.
So let's keep kind of going with that. So if all of those, let's say structures are involved in what create the gut, like those are the things that are involved in all of the processes. I think those are the physical structures. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit and look maybe at the communication between the gut and the rest of the body. I think would be something really interesting for people to understand. Is like we've all heard of the gut as the second brain. This kind of gut brain axis gets floated a lot, but I don't know how many people have the implications of that. What does that mean that, our gut is constantly sending signals to the rest of the body? What does that mean that the gut and the brain are communicating? Can you kind of maybe give us a little bit of a breakdown of some of that part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, gut brain axis, brain gut connection, it's called a couple different things, but the brain and the gut, meaning the intestines part of the gut, are directly connected through the largest nerve in our body known as the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve also goes through your lungs or liver. It's like all the way down to your toes. But the biggest connection there is one from right behind the ears in the brain all the way down straight into that intestinal lining that I had described, that has the tight junctions that hold it together. And so if the gut starts to become weak from antibiotics or birth control or stress or poor nutrition or alcohol, the gut starts to become weak, it's going to send up warning signs and neurotransmitters straight up to the brain that there's inflammation and that there's a problem. And the same thing vice versa. If there's something going on in the brain, a lot of depression, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, it's going to go right back down into the gut and provide that inflammation. So now you have a two-way working street back and forth that's causing a lot of stress, a lot of inflammation in the body. And what will eventually end up happening is, yes, you'll see depression and anxiety from the brain gut connection, but what will happen in the gut is it's sort of like shocking it over and over, and it starts to separate those junctions that hold the intestinal lining together, and they start to separate. And then we have something known as leaky gut, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So now anything that goes in the gut can go into your bloodstream, which is not actually legal for your body to do and causes a lot of problems later, autoimmune issues, chronic disease, and so on and so forth.
There's so much I want to unpack in that. That's perfect. That's perfect. Well, it seems so simple in some ways. It's like, hey, your gut tells the brain what it's doing, and your brain tells the gut what it's doing. Easy enough, but I think to try to unpack this so that people can make this usable information, let's expand on this a little bit. So if our brain is doing good things, if we are healthier from not only a brain structure, but like a brain function, which I would like consider more of the mind. So how is it actually functioning, not just the structure being healthy? Then it tells the gut, hey, I'm happy. I'm in a good place. You can just, operate as normal with the fuel and the food and all of the things that are carried on that as I send it down to you. Is that okay so far?
So far, I would say because the emotions can come into play and the brain can be tricky, you can also maybe not be happy, but also start to tell yourself you're happy in that aspect as well too. So if you are happy and you're going about your life, yes, it's sending good signals that everything is a-okay, the serotonin boosts, we have good moods. But if you're not, you can also manipulate into telling yourself that as well too. Just a caveat I wanted to throw in there.
Yeah, let's go down that. If I am having trouble, whether that be stress, whether that be difficult times from mental emotional aspects, then my brain is kind of telling my stomach, hey, we're struggling, we're in survival mode, we're in fight or flight, we're going through these troubles. What does the gut then do differently in those situations than it would do with that from the happy kind of moments?
Absolutely. So, you'll see all sorts of symptoms. Symptoms are trigger warning signs for our body. People see symptoms as a bad thing. I personally think that symptoms are a good thing because they tell us what's going on in the body. They're like a tap on the shoulder. So, it starts with bloating. That's usually the first indication that the gut is off is bloat after meals, or whatever you go out to eat, you're feeling bloat, that pressure in your stomach. And then maybe it turns into constipation, you're not going to the bathroom for a few days, or the opposite where you're having emergency bathroom situations. But I'm really stressed out, I'm in over my head, oh my gosh, I'm worried about my finances, my family. Boom, sends it right down to the gut, and the gut is going to give off symptoms to say something is not good here. So I got to fix this. I got to tell you that something's wrong.
Like this, we got so many questions on this. So how do you know? Like, I mean, we all have stressors in life, right? Like everybody's like got their own path. They've got their things going on. How do we know, like, am I overthinking things? Is this coming from, some of the stressors that I have that I'm dealing with? Or do I have a gut issue? Like, how does somebody know that? What are we doing? Are there tests that you're running for some of this stuff? Or is this like, conversation? When do you feel it? Is there times when it's gone? What's the diagnosis process for that?
So I'm going to just go by process of elimination here because that's what I do when someone comes to see me. But I'm sure you have intake forms, right? So I'll dive in and do some intake forms. And on those forms, I'm really, from their symptoms, able to see if they're in, high adrenal fatigue, or they're experiencing a lot of stress. If they've gone through, I do ask if they've gone through traumatic situations, and so on and so forth. So I'm gonna go on a whim and say that pretty much 99.9% of people who are experiencing gut issues are experiencing stress in their life, because I do think it's one of the root causes. But let's look at I have foundational pillars. So how's the nutrition? Can we clean that up a little bit? How's the stress? Can we clean that up a little bit? Maybe do we want to add a little supplementation just to boost a little bit? And then what's the emotional health? Like, how can we, look deeper into what stored emotions we might have? So those are kind of like the pillars I go into and see which one feels the most off. Where do we focus first and start to peel the layers back?
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking about this. One thing that we do with our patients is there's always kind of a workup of like, are you having inflammation from your system not working well, and that's causing your physical pain, or is your physical pain causing a change that trickles back into, systemic dysfunction? And at the end of the day, and I think it goes back to this kind of gut brain axis, is like, we want to elevate both of them so that, we're kind of checking all the boxes, because what we were saying before, like, it's really hard to have like one healthy and one unhealthy because they're so intertwined in terms of their function. So like we elevate them together, and if one pulls the other one down, like, does it really matter which one we start with? I don't know. What's your thought on that?
When you were saying that, I was almost picturing like a marriage, right? So, I mean, I was married previously. I don't know if you're married or not. I don't remember, but are you married?
I'm not yet.
Okay. So it's like in a partnership. Okay. For those of you who are listening, someone at some point has been in a relationship or a marriage or something. If one person in that marriage is really struggling mentally, physically, it's naturally going to bring the other person into it because they care. They love them. Like, your brain loves your gut and your gut loves your brain. They're best of friends. They are in a marriage. But if one is struggling, yeah, it's going to, there's not one without the other, basically. That's what I was kind of thinking when you were saying that, is they just go hand in hand. They're married.
Yes, I think it's a good way. I mean, and I'm kind of putting that together as we go through this. It's like, we're trying to say, is it that you have a unhealthy gut biome? And I'd love to define that in just a moment. Or is it that, your stress and anxiety is causing a negative impact on your gut? But I don't think those could be mutually exclusive. Like, I don't know that you could have one of those alone and the other one be in a good position, as I'm like kind of speaking this into the universe.
Well, it's just kind of like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Does anybody ever define the end of that statement. I don't know. It feels the same to me. Yeah.
So what do you say? Like if we're talking about an unhealthy gut, what is that? Like
Yeah.
what does that look like inside? What is that are there, are we doing stool tests for that? I mean, obviously you said like the first sign is somebody who's experiencing bloating. Like how regularly would somebody have that if they are having an unhealthy gut? What do you have on some of that?
Yeah. So symptom wise, just easy symptoms to know if you have an unhealthy gut, like baseline, you would probably be dealing with bloat. Most people are dealing with bloat like I don't know, every other day, couple times a week. It's definitely something to them that's signaling something's wrong. In my practice, I call it the gold crown. You need to be going number two every day, twice a day. That's healthy. So if you're not, then you may have gut issues, right? If you're constipated, or experiencing the opposite, emergency situations after you eat something, something doesn't sit right, and you're dealing with that burping, heartburn, gas, those kinds of things. That's like the obvious. But
Yeah.
then beyond that, what's not so obvious for people, and this is, I treat people for a lot of this too, eczema. Eczema is a huge illness, disease. It's autoimmune, actually, related to gut issues. People with thyroid or hormonal imbalance, that's always related to back to gut issues. Heal the gut, heal your hormones, I always say. Um, you know, blood sugar issues, hormonal imbalance, anxiety, acne. Almost every single one of my clients' skin clears up when we start working on the gut, but they've been working on clearing their skin for forever. It never cleared until you get that. So, looking at broad spectrum, we have a myriad of symptoms that show like that your gut is distressed. Those are, if you're experiencing those, most likely your gut is distressed. And then one we haven't tapped on that is heavily related to gut issues that people do not ever think about is allergies. Allergies are hugely related. People say, oh, it's just seasonal allergies, seasonal allergies. I'm like, when's the last time you looked into your gut? You mentioned testing. I do test sometimes. It depends on the person, it depends on where they're at, because there's a lot I can do without testing. But if we can't get there, we do want to look at the stool. And then most often, or even a saliva or energetic test for someone with allergies, I'll see, they were exposed to mold or they have heavy metals in their body. So it's not only just what you eat and what's in the stool. Sometimes it's what you're exposed to as well too. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, yes. So, we get into that. One thing that we always start to look at whenever we're working with patients is their inflammatory level. So, like, what are the inflammatory cell counts in their body? And knowing that it's like the load on your immune system is too high, we need to resolve that. And I think this is really, if I go back to it, what kind of opened my curiosity around gut health, it was seeing that whenever we started doing something called a fasting mimicking diet. Are you familiar with that? For patients who had significant levels of inflammation. And one thing that they started coming back with was they just felt better. When we would test them, inflammation went down, but also kind of what you're talking about is like their bloat went away, their GI distress got better. They all kind of mentioned like their, like constipation improved. And you look at the benefits of fasting and kind of clearing that stuff out. I think that was like the first part. But then somewhere in there, you start to say like, well, they're going through this and somewhere in there, their gut function is improving from this. So is it that we're reducing inflammation through some of this stuff, and that is helping kind of calm inflammation at the gut, or is it that we're giving the gut some time to get healthier, and that's part of the process of clearing some of the inflammation out, and so that certainly has led to some of this. So when we're unpacking that a little bit, certainly from my experience, if we leave these symptoms untreated, they're going to have an elevated level of inflammation throughout the body. What are some of the other things that happen if we don't correct these gut issues, if we don't address these early enough?
Absolutely. Um, I always say that it starts with inflammation. just like you said, you're seeing probably high calprotectin levels and inflammation off the charts. It's like, okay, we got to manage this inflammation. But in the body, inflammation leads to bacteria overgrowth. That can attract things like parasites and candida and different stuff like that. And then bacteria leads to autoimmune. And autoimmune, now you might have a diagnosis with something a little bit harder to manage or treat, can be reversible if you work with the right person, but now we have a more serious issue. And then autoimmune leads to cancer. So you can leave these things untreated and maybe take medication to suppress them and maybe live a decent long life. Or you can work to prevent that, stay off medication, and probably live a high level, healthy, longer life. It just depends on how you want to go out. But there will be a definite like staircase to the wrong direction. And I know everybody is crazy over preventing cancer. I mean, this is how we prevent cancer. Cancer is inflammation and acidity in the body. So you talk about the fasting mimicking, what you're allowing is the gut lining when it's distressed. The gut lining is actually one of the fastest healing tissues in our body, but it's also the one that's constantly dinged all day because we're constantly eating, drinking, we're never stopping. So why does fasting help? Of course, because you're allowing the gut time to rest. It's like on vacation, cool, chill, man. Like I just get some time alone finally and I can heal. That's why you have such rapid, fast lowering of inflammation.
What are some of the other things? So you help people go from this, like they are in these bloated, inflamed states, and now we're trying to get that system corrected so that they can, restore their healthy gut. And one of the things you said that I'm going to put it out there and we can expand on it. You can tie this into your answer or not. You don't have to, but I know so many people like this. The traits that make you a high achiever are the same traits that prevent you from healing your gut. And I was like, I'm going to send this answer to the next like 10 people that I know, because I have so many that are in that area. But as we're correcting this, let's go through some of these steps that you're trying to do to get some of these high achievers and some of these other people who are just dealing with stuff healthier.
We just opened a can. You pulled that straight from my Instagram, I think. I just want to repeat it, but the traits that make you a high achiever are the traits that are keeping your gut ruined, like that's keeping your gut going on. And here's what I've seen, because I do coach high achieving women. I coach busy women. I coach entrepreneur women, executive assistants, and they're all also moms. So they have three jobs. They have wife, mother, and high achieving professional. Where is there room for themselves? There's not. There's usually never room for themselves. When they meet me, my number one thing is, how do we work to prioritize yourself? Most high achievers are looking to just, go out there and do everything that they can do to be successful and to help everyone else. They tend to be people pleasers. I love you guys. I'm the same way. So I'm just, mirroring you guys. But they tend to be people pleasers. They don't have healthy boundaries. They might answer emails super late. They might get up really early and get right on their phone. They have a checklist that they're checking off every day. They feel like everything has to be perfect all the time. So maybe you can relate to this. This is a past version of me. I don't relate to it anymore. But that type A mentality is keeping you sick. And because there's no space for, making healthy food, there's no space for sitting down and eating, there's no space for 8 hours of sleep. And the space doesn't just fall from the sky. We have to create it. And so that's what I do with my clients is work. The hardest thing that I do is to work. It feels like churning butter sometimes, like work to create space in a high achieving type A person's, it can be a man too, schedule so they can actually heal and get rid of the stuff that's not serving them.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about, and I work with quite a few of those same exact people. So what does that look like though? Like,
Yeah.
are they, what does that look like to you? What are the big things that you see,
Yeah.
positively affect their overall health, certainly their gut health?
Yeah. I don't know. Have you ever read the book 10X is easier than 2x?
I recently did read that book. Yep.
Yeah, it's a great book. And for anyone who hasn't read it, it is a business type book where you're letting go of the 80% of the stuff in your life that isn't serving you, and you're keeping the 20% of the things that are going to help you achieve higher levels in your life. Well, I use the same scenario with my clients. There's probably 80% of things that high achieving people are doing in a day that don't need to be there. They're just ignoring themselves. They're trying to not manage emotions. They're trying to, if there's a moment of silence, they think they're being lazy. And so they want to just keep pushing into that. So my job is to come in and sort of help them see that. And how do we start eliminating that 80%? And I will tell you, sometimes the boundary, we'll set boundaries. Number one, like, okay, work is done at this time and it's family time. We're more present. Are we watching Netflix? Are we scrolling on Instagram? Are we nervously cleaning for no reason when we don't have to? If you're a high achiever, you can probably afford a housekeeper. So let's do that. Or maybe you can afford someone to prep your food for you, so you don't have to take that time. Like, we look at your life. It's different for everybody because it depends on what you can afford. But let's look at your life and say, how do we make your life easier? And how do you allow yourself to say, if I rest, I don't need to deserve it. I can prioritize myself and I can do this. And then they start to heal. Does that make more sense?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think knowing some of those people, they're going to be like, no, just what is the drink? Like, what's
Yeah.
the pill that you need to give me?
Yeah. I have the supplements that will help. I have, the diet that tell you what to do for your diet. But for those people, that won't last past 30 days. And so they're going to forget me in 30 days. They're going to forget themselves in 30 days if we don't actually make the long-term adjustments.
Yeah. I mean, I see that. One of the questions we got was like, why does it seem like people who try to eat the healthiest and the strictest have more gut issues?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, as you say that, if that's not part of it, is like they are kind of really grinding on making sure that they're perfect in that area of what they're putting in, but there's this whole layer on top of it that they're avoiding.
Yeah. Well, it's rigid. And rigidity probably stems from a place of fight or flight, right? There's anxiety involved, even if they think, or what do they call it? Like a high functioning, anxious something. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like the holistic psychologist talks about it, but like high functioning anxiety. Basically, it doesn't look like on the outside that you have anxiety because your life looks super organized and perfect. But on the inside, your whole gut microbiome, your brain, everybody's having like a rager of, like there's so much internal combustion. And what I will say about what you said, if it has anything to do with it, if you are that high anxiety type person, that high stress person, you're stuck in fight or flight. When you are in fight or flight, just as I explained in the beginning of the podcast, what the digestive system does, all of those points of your digestion shut down completely. So saliva stops, hydrochloric acid stops, bile stops, the intestines stop moving. So you eat food in a high state of stress, even if it's like the most perfect gut healing balanced meal that, Dr. Mark Hyman told you to eat, you're still going to get bloated because your food isn't digesting. It's literally like a factory, and like, boom, it just shuts down. So you have to be in a calm state. We can't do that if you're always in this never stop, never ending anxious state.
So create some space, slow down a little bit. What else, as we're still kind of like helping our theoretical, high functioning, anxious person?
Yeah.
What are some of the other things we can take this into nutrition? But is there anything else you would do with them before you got to that?
Before I got to nutrition,
Yeah.
I would probably talk to them about emotions, big stuff that's gone on in their life. If they've had major surgeries, For women, I always ask if they have breast implants because that has been known to affect the gut microbiome bigly. If they've had COVID, if they were vaccinated, if they had lost a family member or been in deep grief in the last couple of years. Big things like that, big trauma on the body can cause a lot of, oh, wow, all of a sudden I have gut issues and I don't know why. And then when I say, when did they start? 3 years ago. Okay, what happened 3 years ago? I lost my dad. Boom. Now we know where that has come from, so we can start to unpack the emotions as well too.
Beautiful. So let's go into some of the fun stuff. One of the things I discovered while I was looking at this is that the average American eats like less than 15 grams of fiber a day.
Yeah.
That's incredible, in a bad way.
Yeah.
What, from a nutrition standpoint, what are the things that really move the needle to improve the microbiome, gut health, everything that we've talked about?
I would love to say that I would love everyone to increase their fiber. Obviously, what we really need is about 35 grams a day. The problem with that is if you have gut issues and you shoot up to 35 grams of fiber a day from 15, you are going to shock your system and you're probably going to get really constipated, and you're going to think you're like, what the heck, I just ate more vegetables, I should be on the right track. So first of all, I would always suggest slowly increasing fiber, starting to move things over. If your only fiber you're getting is like one piece of lettuce on your hamburger, can you then have like a serving of leafy greens on the side with your dinner, and then start to increase, maybe if you only one piece of fruit, start to eat two, and so on and so forth, so that you're slowly increasing. I would say take it slow over maybe the course of 2 weeks. That's a huge one.
Yeah, that was a question I had. One of the studies that I pulled, that was from I think Stanford's labs on kind of gut health, was that in one of the groups that had a low diversity to start, when they increased fiber, it actually increased their inflammation in the short term. And I think that goes to what you're saying. It's like you don't have a healthy gut to start with, and then we start to load this fiber in that, your body does, it's still having to, use that kind of, biome to process some of that stuff. And are we just overloading it too fast before the body actually built up those resources? We want everyone to exercise, but if you come out the gates and try and run a marathon, you're going to break things down more than you're going to help.
Right, absolutely. You're spot on. And so to say, like how you said, the fasting mimicking diet from before, and I will just say as like a tiny disclaimer, I don't do a lot of fasting with women because of hormones. For that reason, I'm not against it under under the care of a doctor or under the care of a coach. I do agree that it helps reduce inflammation, but it's not always my first go-to. However, when we're talking about it this way, fasting versus just eating the whole rainbow of colors of fiber in one day, yeah, the fasting is going to help more. Why? Because it gives the body space to dump what needs to be out of the body first before we start bringing stuff in. If you're compacted, if your stool is compacted, your gut is compacted, you just start, shoving kale down there, it's going to make it a lot worse. So there needs to be an in between, providing that space. It does take about 4 hours to digest food from mouth to intestines. So constant snacking is something I tend to take away from my clients, which again is why fasting so short, fasting 4 hours in between meals, about 3-4 hours, helps move that as well too. Yeah.
So we're going to start to slowly increase fiber. What are some of your like favorite fiber foods?
I mean, fruit is a go-to for me. I don't know how you feel about this, but I do feel like if any health professional is steering you away from eating fruit while healing your gut, I would run very far away because fruit has so many phytonutrients, anti-cancer properties. It helps the gut microbiome. You just have to be careful about introducing it to make sure it feels right for you. But citrus fruits, oranges, tangelos, those kinds of things. Green bananas, excellent, because if they're green, They are prebiotic fiber, and prebiotic foods help feed probiotics. When someone has gut issues, if you just throw probiotics at them, that might be too much. Again, like, it's like throwing one bone into a pack of 10 pit bulls. It's just too much at once. It will combust. But if you add in prebiotic fiber, then it feeds the probiotics and things start growing on their own. So green banana a day, I say for my clients. Cooked apples, that's incredible because apple pectin sweeps the gut lining, sweeps the intestines, and can move stuff through. It's very, very powerful for healing the gut. So I do something called stewed apples. You can just rinse an apple, cut it up, boil it a little bit so it's softened with some cloves and cinnamon. Just enjoy that on the side of something or eat it first thing in the morning to sweep through, and it's really, really beneficial. Leafy greens. We love our leafy greens. I do suggest sauteing them either in water or a clean cooking oil like coconut oil or olive oil, just to start. A large side of leafy greens every day really helps with constipation, and obviously you get your vitamin K and vitamin D. Those are some of my faves so
Uh,
far.
you mentioned this. That's great. One of the things I have questions on is like, should we always be doing some version of like cooking our greens?
Not necessarily. I don't think always, but if you are having a lot of digestive issues, it can be I have like 10 JRW digestive principles to live by. And one of them in the beginning is to cook food more than eating raw. That's why I stew apples or, I might saute the leafy greens. It just is a little bit more gentle. If you think about the gut, if it's weak, like a cut on your arm, if you have a cut on your arm and you just come by and you just keep scraping the cut, it's never going to heal. And that's like how raw food can be on the intestines. But if you cook it, it's softer and it's more gentle. But I still have some clients who will heal their gut eating salads and cut veggies and hummus. Like they don't have a problem. Some people do.
This kind of leads me to one of my new, I guess, interests as I've studied this. And one of the studies that I pulled for this was from Justin Sonnenberg's lab on where they compared a 10-week high fermented foods diet versus 10 weeks of a high fiber food diet. And very, very interesting results where they found like the fermented food. Now they were eating quite a bit. I think they were eating like fermented food at every meal. So they were just
Yes.
adding it into every meal, which is like, okay, like you're really loading that up, but it reduced inflammation to a very high degree across these people. And basically all the markers they could follow seemed to improve with gut health. So where do fermented foods fall into this? What is a level that somebody who's not part of a study should shoot for? What are your favorite fermented foods? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. I love fermented foods. One disclaimer on that, sometimes people will say like, okay, kombucha is a fermented food. It is obviously a fermented food, but the thing about kombucha is it does have caffeine in it. Most people are surprised to hear that, so I like to say it. And it also is most often like boiled with sugar, unless you get the ones that are made with fruit juice, and it's bubbly. And so that is not a fermented food I usually recommend for people because it can cause more gas. The bubbles can cause, the hydrogen can cause more gas. The caffeine can cause crashes later. So that's one I would put on the back burner until the gut is healed. But I love sauerkraut, kimchi, those kinds of foods, the more fermented foods, cabbages and stuff like that. I get a really great beet sauerkraut that I love. We were talking about our little turkey tacos before we got online here. I'll just put a little bit on top of there. But you don't have to eat a ton. I do recommend eating the fermented foods last or like more towards the end of the meal. It just helps your body start to digest first. So it's not the first thing that goes in, and then you'll take the probiotics in. But I'm all for probiotic foods. As far as dosing, I would say, again, start slow. Maybe if you're getting a jar of something, start with a tablespoon and then you can work your way up to whatever feels comfortable for you. If you're feeling bloating or gas, back off a little bit. You've maybe gone too far.
So we're going back to our like we're healing our person's gut here. So they start to like creep that level of fiber up. So maybe that's like 5 grams a week more from wherever they were at. A few meals, we're starting to add some fermented foods in there. What are some other things that can help heal this stuff in terms of, is that food that they need to focus on? Is that supplements? Is that compounds? If we're trying to heal an unhealthy gut, a leaky gut, and we've gotten to this point, what's next?
So, one of my favorite things to incorporate with my clients, I call good gut walks. If you can walk for 5 to 10 minutes after your meals, you will increase the speed of your digestion by like 50, 75%. That's my own statistics. So I just threw that in there. So good gut walks are walking or getting some movement right after you eat. And then I also love, a first light walk, which is like when sun is rising or shortly after, get that first sunlight. You would be shocked at how fast this one change can heal the gut. Because most people, they get right to work in the morning, they go into synthetic lighting or their camera lights or whatever it is, and then they eat and they stay seated at their desk. So there's really no movement, no digestion. When you watch, I watch some shows about the blue zones that are in, all over the country, in the world, excuse me. What you see is that they walk a lot, and we drive everywhere, we sit. So if you can start to increase your walking 5, 10 minutes after every meal, and that first light in the morning. A bonus walk for my clients is right before bed. Instead of watching Netflix, go for a little stroll around your neighborhood. And that just starts to set your circadian rhythm off. Your circadian rhythm does control a lot of your gut microbiome. So doing that, and that's okay, let's say 5 minutes after every meal. Now we're at 15 minutes, maybe a 10, 15 in the morning. We're still under an hour of movement a day, which is still low, but it's still better. And that you can boost right away. That's not going to put you into more inflammation. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. I think we all know that. I know certainly for myself, if I eat and I go sit on the couch within a very short period of time, you're just like, I can't sit here. I don't feel real good. Now, one of the issues that I see, certainly whenever it comes to pain, is that we're not very good at listening to our body these days. We've ignored a lot of these signals. Is that something that you work on with gut? Because I could imagine that there's people out there who have lots of health issues. They've got skin issues, they've got inflammation, and they're so used to feeling bad that they don't even notice the bloat. They don't even notice the GI distress. Do you work with people on tapping into that in any degree?
Every day. If you're a client of mine and you say, I ate this and I was bloated, the first question I'm going to ask you is, what was your state? How was your emotion? Where are you at in your cycle? How are you feeling mentally? What did you do at work? Did your kid piss you off? I'm looking at everything but the food, actually. And I have my clients track their emotions. I have a really cool tracker for my portal where it's like, okay, they will maybe track what they ate for their food. I don't care about calories and macronutrients and stuff as much as I want to just see a picture of what you ate so I can get an idea of what it was. And then it tracks their mood. How did you feel before you ate? How did you feel after? Were you anxious? Were you rushed? Did you have a bowel movement? And that in itself is what I'm teaching them over the course is get in tune with your body. And for women, we go even further and we get in tune with that infradian rhythm, our cycle. And that they just start to know their body inside out. And so I pride myself a lot when my clients are like, I noticed this. I'm like, good, we're getting in tune. And that's the most important part for both men and women.
I love it. Yeah, quite helpful. I think the more we're in tune and we're listening to our body, the better across the board. One of the things I teach new doctors is to do like a body scan meditation, which is sounds ridiculous, but I'm like, it's going to be really hard for you to tap into what your patient's feeling and to think outside of the box of what that might be affecting if you can't have some way of what would that feel like? What would that be like if I was dealing with that? And all the really good practitioners I've seen either have that or they've experienced it, and that's the path that they were on, and that is the superpower that they get to kind of share that. But they also that creates a different level of empathy because they're like, I know exactly what that felt like. You mentioned kind of, your kind of journey to this a little bit. I'd like to hear that a little bit more. But one thing I'd like to hear from you is like, what were some of the things you tried that didn't work?
Okay, well,
She's
how much
like,
time do
it's
we
a whole
have?
book.
Yeah, like $50,000 worth of bad. But like I mentioned before, I was sick. I was sick as a child. And we're not going to do any math here, but I was a child of the 80s. So nobody knew what gluten was, what gut health was. Like nobody was really even, understood. My mom had no idea why, did some things make me throw up? Why did some things make me bloated? Like it was really hard to tell. And I grew up on the standard American diet, like the worst of the worst, Burger King, Salisbury steak, Swanson meals, like the worst of the worst, like literally ice cream every night. So it's like nobody really knew about nutrition. And so I get into high school, it manifests into crippling anxiety, acne, eczema, all of these things. I barely graduated high school because my focus was so bad and I just was sick all the time. And so when I started to step into like the world of holistic health, I was just like thrown into a tunnel. So it started with an extremely restrictive candida diet, which did take my symptoms away, but it created a bigger problem, which was hormonal imbalance and adrenal fatigue. My body basically went into, I wasn't like fasting on purpose, right? I was just like restricting fruit. I was restricting complex carbohydrates, like things I needed for energy. My energy tanked. And then I went into adrenal fatigue and I was bedridden for a while because my body was like, this is not enough food for an adult, like an adult
Yeah.
woman who works out. I was also lifting very heavy supersets all the time, very in the weightlifting world. So that was bad. That's why I say run if someone tells you not to eat fruit and complex carbohydrates because our brain and body need them. Our glucose needs them for energy. That was a flop. I mostly just that I bought in and paid for things to fix me. I looked for the answer outside of my body all the time. Like someone was like, "Oh, I have this system and it's a 25-day, all you do is drink shakes and it's been known to, cure SIBO and parasites and everything." So I would spend hundreds of dollars on it. I would literally restrict and do the shakes and I would go back to eating regular food and I would be sick again. So it was more like a constant chronic vicious cycle of looking for someone to save me, looking for the answer outside of me. I might have been like, Dr. Derrick Hines, what can I do? What can I do? You tell me what to do. I do it perfectly. Type A, right? I do it
Yeah.
perfectly. You would not hear a peep out of me. I would be your best patient. And then I would come back and I would move into what was next and I would be sick again. And I was on this vicious cycle for 10 years until I went back to school for integrative nutrition, learned about holistic health, and made sustainable changes. And like we said, found the answers inside, got in tune with my own self, and then it was successful. It was like, okay, now I'm actually taking care of my body and listening to my body and doing the things it needs versus short-term fixes that don't last.
Yeah, at least with health, I go back and forth on this idea, but I'll say it here because I think there is some validity to it, although I would push back on it being applied to all situations. But there's the idea like if you can't do it for a year, then you shouldn't do it for a day. It's like if it's not a thing that you can sustain, is it a quick fix to a bigger problem?
Is it a quick? That's perfect. Literally love that quote. Like if you can't do it for a year, 2 years, 3 years, then you shouldn't do it for a day. And granted, where I would put a caveat is potentially for your clients that are borderline, for anyone's clients that are borderline, like really sick or extremely
Yeah.
overweight or very inflamed. Yeah, ketogenic or fasting mimicking under a doctor's care for a short period of time will quantum leap you in your health. But then the doctor should be providing next steps long term. How do we get there after?
Yeah, we're trying to put the fires out so that your body can do some stuff after and
Yeah.
work properly. You mentioned gluten. I'm going to parlay this into a bunch of the listener questions that we got. Let's talk about gluten a little bit. We got a bunch of questions that like, why is gluten bad? Is gluten actually bad? What does gluten do to the gut lining? Does gluten cause leaky gut? We got every version of that question. So let's unpack what gluten is a little bit. I used to love the Jimmy Kimmel thing where he'd go around the streets and ask people what gluten is, and everybody was like, "It's terrible. We hate it." Like, what is it? It's so bad. Don't eat it. It's in all your bread and pasta. Yeah, but what is it? I don't know, man. I'm just
They
not supposed
don't
to have
know.
it.
So gluten is actually the protein found in wheat products. So it's very similar to in dairy. Casein is, the protein found in that, and some people have casein allergy. Gluten is basically like the mirror of that inside of wheat products. So if you have like, bread with flour or pasta or muffins or whatever, anything with flour and wheat products in it, it's going to contain gluten. And that protein that's found in gluten is what people are actually having the reaction to. Now, there's levels of gluten intolerant. Like there are celiac where it's like someone blows flour on their body and they turn into a pumpkin at midnight versus, just somebody goes out to dinner and they have like mild discomfort because they were, had gluten sensitivity. All are very serious. And one of the things I tell everyone, especially my clients who I decide to do gluten free, because not everyone needs to be gluten free, but my clients, we decide we're going to be gluten free by tracking, is that it takes about 7 days for the inflammatory response to leave your body if you've been exposed to gluten, if you are sensitive to it. So some people might say, I don't really eat it a lot. But then I'll say, okay, well, if you ate it on Saturday, it's basically the inflammation's not out until the next Saturday and you're eating it every Saturday. So yeah, you're in a constant inflammatory state and your body doesn't like it. If you're not having a reaction to it, kudos to you. I wish I could be you, but I am one of those people who cannot have it. So yeah, there was a second part of the question, I think, that I didn't get to.
Yeah, I'll circle back to that, but it's interesting because I had a good friend of mine in high school who had just crazy health issues, and this was way before gluten was a thing, as they say. And like I remember maybe being in high school and her saying like, "There's this doctor who thinks I'm allergic to like wheat," and that just sounded so crazy to us. And one, like I don't remember if I've ever asked her this, but like who was it? Like that's progressive back then,
Yeah.
like you're in the 90s and you're like looking at some of this stuff. But it was the first time like when she changed it, we all saw like a dramatic change in her health, her appearance, all of this stuff. Now it certainly has led to, different issues throughout time, but I think it was the first time that we realized like this can be a real thing where you're putting something in that your body goes into attack mode on. So what percentage, if you're talking about, if people are listening to this, people who've had gut health issues, what percentage do you find in your practice benefit from at least decreasing gluten or going gluten free?
I mean, yeah, I would say 100%. It's like a really bold statement. But the truth of the matter is, if you are in an inflammatory state, it is going to be beneficial. And so even I'll go like, there's so much to spawn here. My mind just went like in a million ways, but let me bring myself back in. I have seen women have trouble getting pregnant and remove gluten for 30 days and get pregnant. I have physically seen that in with my clients. I have seen people with cystic acne all over their face and on their back remove gluten for 30 days and the acne is gone. So something in that protein is causing some type of blockage of inflammatory response in the body, and the body isn't doing what it's supposed to do, like excreting, sebum or making a baby or whatever it is. And there's so many different scenarios I could give you, but and when we remove it, we can bring it down. Now, here's the thing. That woman who removed gluten and then had a baby healthy, she went on to have another baby while eating gluten. She didn't go back to the gluten-free for her second baby, and everything's fine. The babies are healthy. So what was it in that moment in time? Did her gut just need resetting? Was there so much inflammation in her body that she needed to remove it for a period of time to heal? But then you have other cases, a case such as myself, where if the flower gets blown on me, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin. Like I have a very terrible reaction from it. And in fact, it puts me in bed, like I'm bedridden. So I do see the benefit in 100% of people when you have gut issues by removing it temporarily at least. And then we do the test. Let's test it. Let's see how things change. And maybe it's 1 year you remove, maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's 10 years. But whatever it is, we have to be in tune with the body to understand. But solid across the board, it's 100%. They get better.
Brilliant. You mentioned casein and dairy, and we did get a bunch of questions about dairy, and I kind of get conflicting reports in terms of like pulling research on dairy. I think we've all probably been in that, but you're on the front lines of this stuff in terms of like constantly seeing and treating people, and sometimes that is sometimes more powerful, I think, than us trying to run these large scale studies, especially in these areas. What do you see with dairy? And what types is there differences in like how we get our dairy in terms of the response?
Yeah. Yeah. If my client, well, first of all, first and foremost, as a recommendation, I always do recommend that people do organic dairy and look on the box that there's no RBST, which is a synthetic growth hormone that is often added to cows to get them to produce more milk or to get, keep them pregnant. And then in turn, we ingest that synthetic growth hormone, and that's causing an estrogen dominance in men and women, which can lead to cancer. So you want to make sure there's no RBST, yes, RBST. Just wanted to make sure I said that right. No RBST, and that it's organic and it's free of synthetic growth hormones off the bat. That
With the with the RBST, do they have to say if that's in there?
Well, they have to say, they usually say if it's not.
Okay, gotcha.
So like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say names, but like Horizon Valley Organic, they say on their organic milk, not treated with synthetic growth hormones, no RBST. So if my client's like, oh, we need milk in the house, what milk is good? I might suggest that, or a brand parallel to that that says it on it. And the thing is also in other countries, they don't use RBST. So if you buy something from New Zealand or Spain or Italy, it's almost always not going to have a synthetic growth hormone, but this is something that America does more. So off the bat, if you're gonna eat dairy, go high quality, get the highest quality of dairy you can have, whether it be European or international type dairy, or you're having like a synthetic growth hormone free type dairy. From there, what I do see with a lot of clients who have dairy issues is that there's a direct correlation with parasites. So people will say, I have, for whatever reason, I'm lactose intolerant, or dairy breaks me out, or I get bloated, I get diarrhea from dairy. And then sometimes we go in and we look a little bit deeper, and I will see, not all the time, not 100% of the time, but I will see a parasite issue. We clear the parasites, we start to bring in high quality, sometimes raw milk, or, high quality cheeses, raw cheeses, different stuff like that, goat's kefir, and they can tolerate it now because the parasites have moved through. And so that is one reason why someone may have, that's only one reason. There are many other reasons. Some people are just intolerant. So it's really important to know, like, not just taking, like, you don't have to be gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, all of these things to live, but taking them out and learning and understanding why they're going wrong with your body is important. And then can we test and put them back in? Because I don't see anything wrong with consuming dairy if it's high quality, especially from a local farm, or, raw dairy and stuff like that. I think it's beneficial for the body, but is it the right way? And are you functioning the right way to absorb it?
So, is that a proper? What would the treatment for parasites be, and how would somebody test for that?
Yeah, so the way that I test through like bioenergetic scans. So it's saliva and hair testing, or I can do a stool sample. Stool samples aren't always really they're not the best way to test for parasites. Energetic testing or kinesiology testing can usually tell. And then when you go in a little bit deeper, you can do, short cleanses, short parasite cleanses. You can do longer ones. Parasites are more active around the full moon. So if I'm doing like a push with a client, I might do like a 5-day push around the full moon. I'll have them use coffee enemas. We'll use different products like wormwood, or black walnut, pumpkin seeds, papaya seeds to pull the parasites out. It just depends on the person and what they can tolerate and what their lifestyle is. Some of my clients love it and they want to go die hard and they want to like a 70-day, give me all the supplement parasite cleanse. And some of them are like, this does not fit into my life. How can I just do it short term? Yeah.
Is there any value to somebody, this is kind of random, but is there value to somebody doing kind of stool samples somewhat regularly? Is there information that they could use that would change their overall health if they're just trying to stay healthy? Like I feel good, everything is doing well. I'm not having a whole lot of these issues. Is that something that they keep up with?
I wouldn't. This is just my own personal opinion. I'm going to tell you that as a practitioner, I veer on the side of less testing because I've had so much testing in my life and I've seen people come to me with like so much. They have like a stack of testing this thick. It's information overload and they attach to the information a lot. I have SIBO, I have IBS, I have parasites. It becomes a part of their identity and then they are always afraid it's going to come back. I have clients that are always constantly scared their SIBO is going to come back because it was so awful. If they never knew they had SIBO and someone just helped them heal their gut in a way, it probably would have been 10 times better because they wouldn't have attached to that story. So less is more with testing. What I like to use testing for is validation. Okay, we test in the beginning, we see that it's like probably for you, we see the inflammation's off the chart, we do what we do. Oh, look, we're validated. The inflammation has gone down. So that's great. But there are tests that we do need for really tough cases. That's why I do the bioenergetic scan, for things like mold, heavy metals, and then we can know. But if you are a healthy individual and you don't have gut issues, do you need to get testing? Not really. I would just say make sure you get your comprehensive metabolic panel with your doctor, make sure your blood levels, your vitamin levels are good, your sleep is good, and just kind of work off of getting in tune with your body.
So I feel like there's been so many really good things that people can do that have been pulled out of some of this stuff. What are some of the things that maybe we shouldn't do? What are some of the issues? I got a bunch. I'm trying to lump like I'm looking at 30 questions that people gave us. I'm trying to put them into categories.
Yeah.
So what are things that we should avoid that are negatively affecting health? Certainly got questions about alcohol and things like that, but let's kind of put that out, all of those things. Is there kind of a group of things that people don't realize or sabotage in their gut health?
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say alcohol right away. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but majority of my clients have to completely quit alcohol when they're healing their gut. And I will say that probably 75% of them do not go back to drinking alcohol because they realize how toxic it truly is to their body and their mind. I'm a big, sober living proponent. But I understand the idea around wanting to have a few here and there. If you're healing your gut, it's best to get rid of it. Coffee on an empty stomach in the morning is just like adding fuel to the fire. It's super acidic. Andrew Huberman talks about the way to drink caffeine is to wait until 2 hours after you wake up, have breakfast first. That just softens the load that it's going to put on you. And you may find after a couple weeks of eating breakfast first, you don't need caffeine. So just try to do that the Huberman way, as I call it. What I would say, just little things, honestly, little things, drinking through a straw all the time. Everybody
You know
walks
what?
with these
I
dang
saw
things.
that somewhere and I was like, I need to dig in this.
Yeah.
Give me the straw. What's happening? What's going on? Is it that they're getting air in?
Yeah, you're sucking. You're literally like sucking air through a straw. It drives me crazy when I see people drink through a straw. And these Stanleys, everyone's walking around with sorry, not sorry, but water is meant to be swished in the mouth. When you're sucking in the air and the water, and then you're just gulping right away. It's just leaving a lot of trapped gas. While we're in the water category, obviously you want to drink really clean water, filtered water. Is the highest level, but carbonated water can cause a lot of gut issues too, like drinking from a can all the time, like a lot of those, bubbly waters that everyone loves to have. Can cause a lot of gas and upset stomach as well too. Eating really fast. Okay, you went through my Instagram. Every other video is about how people check emails and eat at the same time. They're inhaling their food. They're not chewing their food. I explained in the very beginning of this podcast that the saliva in the teeth, that's the first process of digestion. And so if you skip that, you shove the food in, you're not breaking down your food properly. So slow down, chew your food more, don't eat fast. Oh gosh, I have like 100 million. How many more do you want?
Those are great. No, and look, everybody listening to this, I think now we only have about a third of our population listeners is in the South, in like southern United States, where alcohol is quite prevalent. And one of the things I do tell a lot of them as they're going through this is, can you find like something that is an alternative that is okay in some of these. I recently got these little like lozenges that are a GABA, and it was kind of crazy. I was in London last year, and they were talking about this company called Cincha, I believe, and they're making a GABA spirit, if you will. And so this still gives you the like, oh, I've had a buzz, but if we look at the net of everything, if you're getting that, it's actually calming you down in a very healthy way, much less like ethanol, which is kind of, for lack of a better term, poisoning us to do it.
Yeah.
And so, there are things out there where, if you're like, I'm just doing this to heal it, that's fine. But alcohol is an inflammatory, toxic agent, and so it's hard for us to go that route. Sorry, folks. Sorry, family.
Yeah.
I know y'all don't like that one.
I know.
But it's awfully hard for you to get this healthy if we're doing it. I did not know about the drinking through the straw though.
I just can't with the Stanleys. But like what you were saying about the GABA, like also alternatives, kava is a root. There's many, actually, I've seen them in the South, kava bars, where you can get a mocktail made with kava, which is a root, similar to GABA, changes the receptors in the brain and calms the brain down. Now, that's a long-term change. Alcohol is a short-term coping mechanism for stress. The stress is still there when the hangover wears off. But with GABA and kava, there's no hangover, and you're changing the receptors in your brain to start adapting. They're adaptogens. They start adapting to stress, so you're long-term able to cope with stress in the future, versus alcohol is just a building of, we're never going to get to the emotions, we're stuck.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. While we're making everybody mad, let's talk about sugar for a moment.
I didn't know if we were going to go there.
Yeah, so let's go with sugar and what that does to our gut biome.
Yeah, I mean, it's not directly how do I explain this? Okay, so when you have sugar, right, your blood sugar level spikes. And when your blood sugar level spikes, it engages cortisol. And then when you engage cortisol, the brain goes, wow, crazy, same as dopamine. Well, now we go back to the brain gut connection. The brain goes, oh my gosh, what is going on? I'm stressed out. I just got all of this dopamine hit. Excuse me.
Bless you.
And goes to the gut, and now we have inflammation that way. So it's not only inflammation in the gut because it's sugar and it's inflammatory, but it's also the response that it has on your blood sugar level, kicking up that brain gut connection. So you're getting a double on that one, which, similar to caffeine. A little, I would say like a little bit of sugar in moderation is okay, but I would source your sugar from natural elements from Mother Earth. So syrup, figs, dates, honey, those kinds of things. they actually have antiviral, antibacterial properties, antiparasitic. Dates are antiparasitic. And so they help the gut versus sugar really, hurting the gut. And just to piggyback on that, I will have clients come back to me and say, "Oh man, I had a really bad night on Friday with dairy. I had ice cream." And I was like, "Well, hold on a second. Was it the dairy or was it the sugar?" So we go back and we say, "Okay, well, let's try some cheese or cottage cheese or something." They're fine. Boom, it was the sugar, not the dairy. So,
So if people are, you said natural stuff. I did quite a bit. I know we're kind of tagging this on at the end, but I pulled a lot of data on artificial sweeteners and non-nutritive sweeteners. And it's so difficult to put research together on that. But what's your view of it? What do you tell your clients on those things? I know there's a lot out there, and that kind of often lumps a lot of these things together. But these artificial sweeteners uh, and non-nutritive sweeteners, what reaction or outcome do you get with that? Is that something you try and pull back?
are you speaking of more natural ones like monk fruit, stevia? Or are you speaking of like high fructose corn syrup and sucralose and stuff? Because there's a difference between the
I,
two.
I'm glad you said that, because I think that's one of the things that people don't realize is, like, people will often lump all of those together. So
Yeah.
let's do the artificial ones for a moment. So that would be your sucralose, your saccharin, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then let's come back to, some of the what I would consider maybe natural, but probably still non-nutritive.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been to a lot of seminars. I'm sure you have too. And I went to this one seminar where there was a bone doctor there. That's my official name for him. I don't know what it really is, but the bone doctor said, um, this guy came in and shattered his knee. He like fell and he shattered his knee. He was only like 45 or something like that. And he was like blown away. Like, how did this guy completely shatter his knee? Like, he's never seen anything like this. Been a bone doctor for 20 years. And so he started digging a little bit deeper and asking the guy, like, do you eat bad? Do you do this? You do that? And the wife was sitting there, and the wife said, he drinks almost a 2 liter of Diet Coke a day. And the doctor looked at him and he was like, wow, his bone density was so weak from sucralose, from the synthetic sugar in Diet Coke. And so from that point, listening to him talk and doing my own research, you're not just like sugar is better because it's an actual real thing. Sugar cane is a real thing than fake sugars. I would much rather have someone drink a regular Coke than a Diet Coke. That sucralose is just so toxic to the body. And then, of course, it moves through the liver and it's very toxic for the liver, and the liver gets overloaded and can't do a lot of the work it needs to do for the body. I call the liver the Beyonce of the organs. It runs the show. And so when you start to clog that with synthetic sugars like sucralose and high fructose corn syrup, that's what happens. The liver gives out. And so those I would put at the lowest on the totem pole. Say stay as far away from them as you can, because they are contributing to cancer and bone disease and all of that stuff. We go second level, we go to things like stevia and monk fruit. I'm not opposed to them in moderation. The only thing that I say about stevia, and it does still mimic sort of that same sugar response in the body, but the biggest thing about stevia is that in many countries, they use stevia as a form of birth control. So if you're trying to get pregnant, both husband and wife should not be intaking stevia. I would then switch to monk fruit. And, again, in moderation. I don't want you to be taking in like 4 or 5 electrolytes a day and your protein shake and all the stuff to have monk fruit and stevia in all of it. We want clean water. We want to have good things, but a serving a day is not going to hurt you. Unless, of course, like I mentioned, you're trying to get pregnant.
Love it. Yeah. After some of this stuff and some of the information on the gut biome with some of the actual artificials, I've pretty much like sworn those off. And even with the other ones, it's almost like, why would you step there if you can use honey, or if you can use, like dates or figs or something like that to do it, if it's possible to
Mhm.
use some of these things that actually have some net positive versus maybe a neutral or a slight negative.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anything else, if somebody's working to heal their gut, that we missed? I think there's so much value in like just using some of the small things and starting with these small consistent changes. But Is there anything else you'd tell somebody who's on this path and listening to this that they would want to do or look at?
Well, okay, so broad spectrum, obvious. We didn't talk about smoking, not just smoking cigarettes, but also smoking marijuana. I have seen marijuana have a very negative, they've done a ton of studies where it has a negative effect on the gut microbiome. Again, we don't know how it's, grown or what's in it. So I would just remove all forms of smoking, especially vaping. Again, it's sucking, it's air going into the lungs, and it's going to alter the gut microbiome and the brain, right? So if we're changing the brain, we're changing the gut microbiome. And I know we did talk a lot about what we're removing, but as far as putting stuff back in, we really want to think about real food with food that doesn't have an ingredient, right? If you go buy an apple, you look on the back, there's no ingredient list, right? Or, clean meats and cheeses and nuts and seeds and oils and fruit and vegetables, all the stuff on the outside of the grocery store that's bountiful for you. Dive in, eat it all, eat the rainbow. Don't think about what you have to take out, but really focus on what you have to put in. Will keep you in the mindset that this isn't a restriction, that it's a way of life, that it's a lifestyle. And infinite, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think, that was one of the things that keeps coming back in this is like the packaged food, pre-prepared, prepackaged, processed foods. Those are the things that are really hard for our body to deal with, for our gut to handle and recognize maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And it's so much harder for your body to break it down. So you're working overtime and nobody wants to work overtime anyway. So just removing a lot of that processed foods and eat real food. That's what you want to do, like food that doesn't have a label. Yeah.
You mentioned this. I did have a question on it, and it's like, can we make our environment too clean? And the last couple years has been, look, every situation I think we have to kind of deal with. But I see people who are cleaning absolutely everything around their kids, and like, every time their kid touches something. And we've seen a lot of studies, at least with like immigrants and stuff. I don't know if they've looked at it with kids, but can we overdo that stuff? A lot of what keeps our gut biome healthy is us coming in contact with these things. How do you think about that? How do you teach that? I feel like are we going to see the implications of these last couple years in the next couple decades for people?
100%. And I said it years ago, all of the wiping away of the germs were basically creating hyper viruses, because the viruses are just going to keep getting deeper and stronger and heavier if you're going to keep wiping them away with all this antibacterial stuff. I remember as a kid, my mom was like, hey, your friend has the chicken pox, go over to her house. Like that was our way of immunity. And I did. And then I got the chicken pox, and then I never got them again in my life. Right. And so it's like, instead of hoarding us away and hyper focusing on the stress about never getting sick, which stress is going to get you sick anyways, it's like, allow children to be in the dirt. We are so not, we're so mineral deficient because we're not in the soil anymore, and soil has changed. Or, allow the kids to play outside, let yourself get a little bit dirty. We don't have to clean everything. So, and it's okay to get sick. Like I got sick a couple weeks ago. It was a reminder to myself that I might have been pushing myself a little bit too hard. Listen to my body, tune in, move on. It's not a shameful thing to get sick. It's a part of the body letting go of what it doesn't need anymore.
Yeah. So there you go, folks. Get dirty a little bit. Get in the grass, roll around, play with your animals.
Please. Yeah, absolutely.
Jaclyn, this has been gold. I've got notes like scribbled all over the place. There's so many like great little things that people can start with. One of the questions we ask all our guests is like, if somebody listening to this can do one thing today to improve their health, what is that one thing that you would tell them to do?
Right. So hard. Um, get outside, walk in sunshine, be in the sunshine. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. That's fantastic. There's so many downstream effects of that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful place for y'all to start. Jaclyn, where can people find more about you? Where can they work with you? Where can they get all of your information? Where can they follow you? All that fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am most active on Instagram. It's at Jaclyn Renee Wellness. Shoot me a DM if you have a question. I'm happy to answer it. You can always email me, Jaclyn at Jaclyn Renee Wellness. And also my website is jaclynreneewellness.com. Like I said before, I work with mostly women, high achieving women, and I help them heal their gut and become the healthiest versions of themselves. And I also run some in-person workshops as well too. So get at me on Instagram and you can find me there.
Absolutely. We may, I'm sure if anything I got from previewing this conversation, if we get a ton of questions, perhaps we can do a round two. And I know we like started it off with saying we were going to talk about like retreats and your release stuff. And then we got all into it. Tell us a little, give us like the elevator pitch of release and what
Sure.
you're doing with that.
Absolutely. So I've been an online coach for a really long time. I've been craving in person, and I started to research and study the amount of emotions that people suppress in their body that contributes to their chronic gut issues. So I created a class called Release. It's a healing somatic movement class. We do journaling, we do visualization, we do movement, and we basically throw adult temper tantrums in the middle of it, which is so releasing for children, for men, for women. And I'm starting to host these classes all over. I'm starting in Scottsdale and the next one's in Michigan. And of course you can get all that information on my Instagram. But this class is there for you to move through those emotions and get them out of your body so you can actually see results in your healing journey. Get rid of gut issues, because yes, you can eat all the good food and you can take all the supplements and you can do all the movement. But if you're not healing what's going on inside, that's going to be stuck there and that's going to keep you from getting to the healthiest version of you. So you can check out those classes in my Instagram link.
Beautiful. Jaclyn, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I love this conversation. Thank you for everything that you're doing and helping all the energy that you're putting towards helping everybody and improving the gut health of the world. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right.